Hello, everyone. So, I already made a video today, but I decided to make another one tonight because I found something so amazing in my local thrift store. What is going on? It's not this dark here. Hold on. Let me try something. There we go. That's a little better. That's a little more light. I'm still getting used to this ring light. Anyway, I found something so amazing in the thrift store today that I had to show it to you guys. And it got me thinking about something. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to jump on here and I'm going to share my thoughts. So this is what I found. I'm trying to get this so that you guys can see it. This is a coffee table book called A Matter of Style. And it highlights some of the most famous fashion icons in history. In fact, let me see if I can find the page that has pictures of all of them. And of course, this is hard with the ring light. Of course, you guys know who they are. It's going to be Jackie Kennedy, Princess Diana, kind of the usual suspects. Bridget Bardot, Katharine Hepburn, Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly. It's a fabulous book. Also, I got it for $3.99. I know this book, I think this book is about $49 when you buy it new. And it's a chunk. But wow, what vintage styling inspiration. Like, really just amazing, amazing stuff. But as I'm looking at it, I'm reminded of something that I've said before, but it's worth mentioning again. And that is that vintage reproduction patterns, not vintage patterns, but vintage reproduction patterns. You really actually don't have to buy them to wear vintage. And the reason I'm saying that is, let me give you the same examples I did last time, and then I'm going to show you, I got 3 more patterns this week. I know I said I wasn't going to buy any more patterns, but I have a problem. I haven't found the meetings yet for that, for that group. But so here's one that is kind of straddles both of them, so we'll talk about that one first. This is, they're showing a vintage view. That's Butterick, right? They're showing a vintage view. But then if you look over here, these are the very modern takes on this same dress. This might be a reissue. It may not be. But really, when you look at it, this is a perfect example. Here's the modern view of this dress, which if you made any of these, it would look very modern. But here, styled and done in the more vintage style with the puffier sleeves. Look at her shoe, open-toed platform shoe, the hair, everything else. She gets a more vintage look. Whereas this one, this is like business casual, right? Modern styling. And then I'd already talked about this, but a dress like this. This is a princess seam V-neck dress in like, well, this is kind of right below the knee and then just has a very basic sleeve. Changing any of this around could give it a more vintage feel. And then there's this pattern here. It's just a basic straight skirt. And this in itself is kind of a vintage pattern because this pattern is actually from the 90s. So technically it's now vintage. What is going on with this lighting? Sorry, my camera's trying to adjust to this lighting and it's being very odd. Is that better? Do you like more light, camera? But here's a perfect example. This skirt, especially like, see the red one? That's just about the right silhouette for the 40s. And this one here, the tan one, the hemline on that is more 30s. If I made this skirt, I can style it and make it look vintage. So, like I said, I bought some more patterns. So let's start with what I bought. I bought this Vogue pattern because of this trouser view. Now, the more I look at it, the more I realize this is more of a palazzo kind of leg than just a wide leg. But this is definitely a Hollywood waist. And I'm actually thinking the way I would make this more vintage is after I make it, even though this actually has a back zip, I would put large buttons on this to give it a sailor look. And it would make it look much more vintage. And then there's this jacket. This jacket, if you really look at it, is an ode to the 50s, late 50s, early 60s. It's a kind of, it's a bolero technically, but the sleeve is more of a dolman because of the way it fans out. And then this skirt also. Here's that silhouette again. This is, again, really 1930s. Really, really 1930s kind of silhouette. And then I've been talking about doing a bow blouse for the Christmas fabric that I found in the sewing machine. And I found this online. And this one right here is the one I'm going to make. Again, this pattern's from the 80s. It's a Vogue from the 80s. But look at the vintage styling of this. In fact, you can see where the yoke comes across and there's gathers down here. Then it has the bow up front and the sleeves. This is going to look gorgeous, by the way, with that fabric. I'm going to start working on that probably next. I really like this. And then last but not least, I got this pattern, which is, who is this by? I guess it's Vogue because it's got a V in front of them, but it's called, I'm going to have to put my glasses on. Hold on, guys. It's called Today's Fit, and this is also a vintage pattern. This is from the 90s, and yeah, it's a Vogue pattern, okay, because it had the V. So, remember I was talking about finding a shirt pattern that was a basic camp shirt? This is exactly what I'm talking about. And if you look closely, see this sleeve detail? Very 1940s. Now the collar is interesting. That detail, I wouldn't specifically say is a 40s kind of detail or even a 50s kind of detail. Both of those, during those time periods, you had a much more extended collar. But look at this. See this darting in here? That fitted? That's going to be gorgeous. I'm going to make myself a summer shirt out of this actually. And then this was so gorgeous. Can you guys see? These are French cuffs. So these are the kind of sleeves that you use a cufflink to close. I love that. And I don't know if you remember, but way back, I found those button cufflinks, the set, and I don't have a set of cufflinks, so it'll be perfect with something like that. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this. I actually have this shirt that I'd like to remake. It doesn't fit right. It's, I don't know if you guys remember in the early 2000s, these kind of really big shirts were popular again. They were really long. They were longer in the back than in the front, and they were really big. And they had a pajama kind of style, and they were really popular. I'm thinking about converting that shirt into this shirt. But what am I getting at here? You don't have to buy vintage patterns unless you want to, which I completely understand why you want to buy them. Just looking at the graphics makes me want to buy them. I'm just a little afraid of them. And you really don't have to buy retro patterns. Case in point, I think this was sold to me as a retro pattern, but it's actually a modern dress that they just styled retro. The accessorizing and the styling is what makes things look vintage. It's not necessarily the actual dress, because designers are not reinventing the wheel. These designs that they're using, like here's another example. These designs are already around. They're changing them. They're modernizing them. They're changing buttons. They're updating them. They're changing the sleeve. They're removing a pocket that used to be on the front. They're not reinventing the wheel. I see a lot of people online talking about vintage patterns, retro patterns, reproduction patterns, how expensive they are and everything else. You don't actually need them. My favorite YouTuber is The Closet Historian. And she is very good at explaining when she's making things. Like she'll say, this is a bodice with 2 darts. She'll say, this is a bolero jacket and I'm doing a princess seam, because she's also someone who, she gets it. She understands it. These, you don't really need vintage patterns to make vintage clothing. You can just make vintage clothing using modern patterns and change the accessories, add a pocket, add some more detail. I mean, that was one of the big things about both the 40s and the 50s, and even the 30s, was detail. There was detail in everything. There were buttons on places that didn't need buttons. There was rickrack. There was lace. There was all kinds of stuff going on that you might not necessarily really need, but it was just detail added to the garment. Unfortunately, our modern clothing is much more pared down, and that's because it's all pret-a-porter. It's all like cash and carry, basically, clothes, and it's also fast fashion, so it has to be made and sold very quickly. Adding detail to things adds money, adds time, which adds money, And that's the difference. So anyway, I just wanted to come on and show you guys my new book because I'm like so happy I found this book. And I wanted to show you the couple of new patterns that I got. Even though I promised not to buy any more new patterns, I still bought new patterns. So hopefully I'll stop soon. I'm not sure. I'm going to try. But anyway, I will see you guys later. And hey, I think I'm going to post this Friday. So if I don't see you, have a good weekend. Bye. Like, subscribe, leave me comments. You know I love those comments.